The auditorium was packed wall to wall with bodies, noise, and anticipation. That particular kind of restless energy that comes from 3,000 people confined in one space for too long, pretending to pay attention to something that had stopped being meaningful about 45 minutes ago. 1,200 folding chairs arranged in perfect rows across the polished gymnasium floor of Westfield University, each one occupied by a graduate in royal blue cap and gown, the fabric cheap and scratchy against skin that was already too warm. The families filled the bleachers that rose up on either side like theater seating, creating walls of faces and phone cameras and proud smiles and barely contained boredom in equal measure. The air conditioning system, which had probably been installed sometime during the Reagan administration and hadn't been properly maintained since, struggled valiantly and futilely against the oppressive June heat and the collective warmth of 3,000 people breathing, fidgeting, whispering, taking photos, checking their watches, wondering how much longer this could possibly go on. The smell of too many people in too small a space hung heavy in the recycled air, sweat and perfume and the slightly musty scent of academic regalia that had been pulled out of storage for this occasion and would be packed away again immediately after. I sat in row M, seat 247, a position I'd memorized from the seating chart they'd distributed during rehearsal 2 days ago. I was sandwiched between Jennifer Martinez on my left and David Mackenzie on my right, both of whom I'd shared exactly 3 classes with over the course of 4 years and exchanged maybe 50 total words with in total. Jennifer was texting someone under her gown, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her phone screen, probably making plans for whatever party was happening tonight. David was asleep with his eyes open, or doing an incredible impression of being asleep with his eyes open, a skill he'd apparently perfected during Professor Hammond's 8 a.m. economics lectures junior year. The ceremony had been going for 90 minutes already by my calculation, and we were only halfway through conferring degrees for the College of Arts and Sciences. The College of Engineering had taken 45 minutes. The College of Business had taken another 30. At this rate, we'd be here until sunset, slowly roasting in our polyester gowns while person after person walked across the stage to collect a leather folder that didn't even contain the actual diploma. That would be mailed to us in 6 to 8 weeks, the program had explained, after the university verified we'd actually completed all our requirements and didn't owe any outstanding library fines. My palms were sweating inside the cheap polyester gloves they'd made us wear, apparently part of the formal academic regalia requirement, though they seemed designed primarily to make everyone's hands uncomfortably hot and to leave white lint on our gowns. The mortarboard sat heavy and crooked on my head despite the 6 bobby pins I'd strategically placed to secure it, the elastic band digging into my chin every time I moved. Every few minutes, I'd glance up at the bleachers, Section K, Row 7, where my family sat in a cluster of barely concealed impatience. My mother was in the aisle seat, wearing the navy dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion from the clearance rack at Macy's and complained about the cost of at least 15 times in the past month. $80 for a dress I'll wear once, she'd said repeatedly, as if I'd personally forced her to attend my graduation. Her arms were crossed over her chest in that defensive posture I'd known my entire life, her face set in that particular expression of long-suffering patience she'd perfected over my 22 years of existence, the look that said she was doing me a tremendous favor by simply being present. Next to her was my older sister Rebecca, 26 and already regretting every major life choice she'd made since high school, scrolling through her phone with the bored expression of someone who'd been forced to attend a mandatory corporate training seminar. She'd driven up from her apartment 2 hours away, leaving her boyfriend, this month's boyfriend at least, she went through them like some people went through shoes, to watch her cat, and she'd made sure I knew what an inconvenience this was for her schedule. I had to take a personal day, she'd told me yesterday when she arrived. Do you know how that's going to look at work? Then my younger brother Marcus, 19 and deeply committed to the philosophy that life was something that happened to other people while he played video games and worked part-time at the movie theater. He'd already been caught by the ushers trying to sneak out twice, and once to get food from the concession stand they'd set up in the lobby, once to smoke a cigarette in the parking lot. Each time, he'd been escorted back to his seat with increasing firmness, and each time, he'd sprawled back in his chair with the resigned air of a prisoner being returned to his cell. And at the end of the row, my father, who'd managed to show up sober for once, which was honestly more than I'd expected given that it was before noon and he usually didn't start his day without at least 2 beers. But while he was technically sober, I could see even from this distance that his eyes were glazed and distant, focused on something only he could see. Probably thinking about the bar he'd visit immediately after this was over, already planning which friends he'd complain to about having to waste a Saturday watching his son walk across a stage. They'd arrived 45 minutes late to my graduation ceremony, missing the opening remarks and the keynote speech from some tech CEO none of us had heard of, someone who'd apparently invented an app that did something with cryptocurrency and had sold it for millions. I'd watched them climb the bleachers during the conferring of degrees for the College of Engineering, my mother loudly complaining about the seating arrangement, the heat, the length of the ceremony, her voice carrying across the gymnasium in a way that made several families turn and stare, with expressions ranging from annoyance to pity. She had that gift, the ability to make her displeasure known to everyone within a 50-foot radius, to turn her personal discomfort into everyone else's problem, to ensure that no one could ignore her presence or her feelings about any given situation. "Why are these seats so uncomfortable?" I'd heard her say, her voice echoing off the gymnasium walls. "You'd think a university with such high tuition could afford better chairs." "Mom, quiet," Rebecca had hissed, but it was the kind of half-hearted admonishment that made it clear she wasn't really trying to stop her, just going through the motions of social propriety. "I'm just saying," my mother had continued, not lowering her voice at all, "we've been sitting here for over an hour and we still haven't seen Marcus. How long is this supposed to take? I have things to do today." I'd watched this exchange from my seat, my face burning with embarrassment, and wondered for the 1,000th time why I'd even bothered to invite them. What had I expected? That they'd suddenly become different people? That the importance of the occasion would magically transform them into a supportive, proud family? That my mother would look at me walking across that stage and feel something other than resentment? I'd spent 4 years working toward this moment. 4 years that felt simultaneously like a lifetime and like they'd passed in an instant. 4 years of 18-hour days that started at 5 a.m. and didn't end until midnight, of falling asleep in the library with my face pressed against textbooks that cost more than my monthly food budget, of panic attacks in bathroom stalls before exams where I'd hyperventilate into my hands and try to remember how to breathe. 4 years of ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week and coffee for breakfast every morning, and the persistent, gnawing, low-grade anxiety that maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't belong here among all these students who'd gone to good high schools and whose parents had gone to college, and who seemed to understand the unspoken rules of academic life that no one had ever explained to me. 4 years of being the first person in my family to attend university, not just the first in my immediate family, but the first in my extended family, the first among all my cousins and aunts and uncles, the first person in 3 generations to even consider that education might be a path to something different. The first person to leave our small town of barely 3,000 people, where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever changed and ambition was treated with suspicion. The first person to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be something more than what I'd been born into. My mother had fought me on it from the very beginning, from the moment I'd first mentioned applying to universities during my junior year of high school. "College is for rich kids," she'd said, not even looking up from the grocery store circular she'd been reading, highlighting sales with a yellow marker. "You'll just waste 4 years of your life and end up back here anyway, except you'll have debt hanging over your head for the rest of your life. You're better off getting a job at the plant like your father. At least that's honest work." When I'd gotten my acceptance letter from Westfield, a mid-tier state university, nothing fancy or prestigious, but a real university with real professors and real research opportunities, and I'd shown it to her with shaking hands and barely contained excitement, she'd read it once, handed it back, and said, "They probably accept everyone who applies. It doesn't mean anything." When I'd earned a partial scholarship based on my SAT scores and my essay about being a first-generation student, covering about 60% of tuition, she'd said, "Partial isn't full. Where's the rest of the money coming from? Because it's not coming from us." As if I'd ever expected it to come from them, as if I hadn't already been saving every penny from my part-time job at the gas station since I was 16, planning for this exact moment. When I'd worked 3 part-time jobs during my first semester to cover what the scholarship didn't, tutoring at the campus writing center, shelving books at the library, and washing dishes at a restaurant 2 miles off campus where I'd ride my bike at midnight after closing and show up to my 8 a.m. classes smelling like grease and exhaustion, she'd said, "You're going to burn yourself out for a piece of paper that means nothing. You think you're better than everyone else going off to college, but you're not. You're just wasting time and money pretending to be something you're not." Every holiday home, every break, every phone call for 4 years had been punctuated by her reminders that I was making a mistake, that I was being foolish, that I thought I was better than everyone else, but I wasn't, that I'd fail eventually because people like us always did. Thanksgiving of my freshman year, when I'd come home for 4 days and spent most of them sleeping because I was so exhausted from midterms, she'd said, "This is what college gets you, tired and stressed. You could be working at the plant, making actual money instead of killing yourself for nothing." Christmas of sophomore year, when I'd excitedly told her about being accepted into Dr. Wu's research lab, a position that only 2 undergraduates per year got, an opportunity that could define my entire academic career, she'd listened with her arms crossed and then said, "They probably needed someone to do the grunt work they didn't want to pay a graduate student for. Don't think it means you're special." Spring break of junior year, when I'd stayed on campus to work on a research project instead of coming home, she'd called me and said, "Your own family isn't important enough for you to visit anymore. Is that what college teaches you? To abandon the people who raised you?" And summer before senior year, when I'd told her I was applying for Fulbright grants and several other prestigious scholarships, when I'd tried to explain how competitive they were and how much it would mean for my future, she'd laughed. Actually laughed, and said, "Marcus, honey, be realistic. Those things are for students from Harvard and Yale, not state school kids from nowhere. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Why can't you just be satisfied with getting a regular job like everyone else?" Each comment had landed like a small cut. Individually, maybe they weren't that bad. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe she was just being realistic, trying to protect me from disappointment. That's what I'd told myself at the time anyway. But cumulatively, over 4 years, they'd added up to something bigger and more damaging. They'd created a constant voice in the back of my head that sounded exactly like her, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I was reaching too high, that I should give up before I embarrassed myself. I'd fought that voice every single day for 4 years. Every time I sat down to write a paper, there was her voice saying it wouldn't be good enough. Every time I studied for an exam, there was her voice saying I'd probably fail anyway. Every time I applied for an opportunity, there was her voice saying I wouldn't get it, so why bother trying, and yet I'd made it. Somehow, against odds that had seemed insurmountable more times than I could count, against the external pressure from my family and the internal pressure from that voice that sounded like my mother, I'd made it to graduation day. I'd earned a 3.97 GPA, I'd been published in a peer-reviewed journal, I'd won a Fulbright grant, I'd done everything I'd set out to do and more. But even now, sitting in this gymnasium waiting for my name to be called, part of me still heard that voice saying it wasn't enough, that it didn't count, that I'd somehow cheated or gotten lucky or benefited from pity rather than merit. Marcus David Chen. My name cracked across the PA system, distorted slightly by feedback. I stood up, my legs unsteady, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Jennifer gave me a small, encouraging nod. David didn't notice I'd moved. I stepped into the aisle and began the long walk toward the stage. The graduate ahead of me, Chandra Chakravarti, was just receiving her diploma from the dean, the photographer's flash going off in a burst of white light. I waited at the base of the stairs, trying to remember to breathe. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, carrying across the gymnasium with the kind of projection usually reserved for theater actresses, loud enough that it cut through the ambient noise of 3,000 people in an enclosed space, loud enough that heads began to turn in her direction. He only passed because they felt sorry for him. The words hit me like a physical slap. I froze halfway up the stairs, my hand gripping the railing hard enough that my knuckles went white. Around me, I could hear the ripple effect of her statement, the sharp intake of breath from someone nearby, the muffled laughter from students who'd heard her, the whispered, "Oh my God, did you hear what that woman just said?" that spread through the rows like wildfire. I looked up at the bleachers. Rebecca had her phone pointed at me, recording, a smirk on her face. Marcus was laughing outright, making no attempt to hide it. My father was staring at his hands like he wished he could disappear, and my mother sat there with her arms still crossed, her expression unchanged, like she'd just commented on the weather rather than publicly humiliated her son at his college graduation. The dean was standing at the center of the stage now, my diploma in his hand, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, up into the bleachers, his expression difficult to read. Dean Margaret Fletcher was a formidable woman in her early 60s, tall and imposing, with silver hair she wore in a severe bun, and reading glasses that perpetually hung from a chain around her neck. She'd been dean of the College of Arts and Sciences for 15 years, and in that time had developed a reputation for being both brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd with ease, "please approach." I climbed the rest of the stairs on autopilot, my face burning, my vision starting to blur at the edges the way it did when I was about to have a panic attack. The walk across the stage felt like it took hours. The photographer's flash went off. Dean Fletcher shook my hand and handed me the leather diploma cover. "Congratulations," she said, but there was something in her tone that sounded less like congratulations and more like calculation. I accepted the diploma with a mumbled "thank you" and turned to exit stage left as I'd been instructed during rehearsal. But Dean Fletcher's hand caught my elbow, stopping me. "One moment, Mr. Chen," she said quietly. Then, louder, to the audience, Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just a moment. She stepped down from the podium, still holding my elbow, and gestured to someone in the wings. Her assistant, a nervous-looking young woman I'd seen around the administrative offices, hurried forward and whispered something in the dean's ear. The dean nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Wait here," she told me, then disappeared backstage. I stood there in full view of the entire gymnasium, holding my empty diploma cover, while 3,000 people stared at me and whispered. The ceremony had ground to a halt. The next graduate, David Mackenzie, was still sitting in his seat, looking confused. The president of the university, who'd been sitting in one of the chairs of honor on the stage, looked equally baffled. It felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 2 minutes before Dean Fletcher reappeared. She was carrying a manila folder, the kind with the university seal embossed on the front, and her expression had shifted from calculation to something that looked almost like righteous anger. She walked directly to me and held out the folder. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the back row of the bleachers without need for a microphone. "I believe there are some people in the audience who need to see something. Would you be so kind as to present this to your family?" I took the folder with shaking hands, staring at it like it might explode. What is this?" "Open it and see," she said. Then, even more quietly, for my ears only, "I'm so sorry that happened, but I promise you, you earned everything that's in that folder. Go show them." The way she said it, "show them," made it clear this wasn't a request. It was an order, a challenge, maybe even an act of revenge on my behalf. I looked up at the bleachers again. My family was staring back at me, confused now. My mother's arms were uncrossed, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to uncertainty. "Do I have to walk up there?" I asked Dean Fletcher. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "I'll do you one better. Why don't you open it here, on stage, and read it aloud, so everyone can hear?" My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder. "I can't—" "Yes, you can. Trust me." She walked back to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement. I apologize for the interruption to our ceremony, but this is important. Mr. Chen, whenever you're ready." Every eye in the gymnasium was on me now. The silence was so complete I could hear the air conditioning system rattling above us. I opened the folder. The first page was my official transcript. 4 years of grades, printed on university letterhead with the seal watermarked in the background. I'd seen it before, of course. I'd checked my grades obsessively after every semester, always terrified that I'd see something lower than I expected, that I'd discover my scholarship was in jeopardy. But seeing it now, printed out officially, with the university's certification at the bottom, felt different. At the top of the page, in bold letters, cumulative GPA, 397. I'd known that number. I'd worked desperately to maintain it. But I'd never fully processed what it meant in the context of everything else, in the context of my mother's voice saying, he only passed because they felt sorry for him. Below the GPA, another line in bold. Departmental honors, magna cum laude, and below that, Dean's List, all semesters. My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. My transcript. Dean Fletcher's voice cut in from the podium. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but many people in the audience can't hear you. Could you please repeat that and perhaps share some of the details?" I cleared my throat and tried again, louder this time. "This is my official transcript. My cumulative GPA is 3.97. I graduated magna cum laude. I made the Dean's List every semester for 4 years." The murmuring in the audience increased. I heard someone, I think it was Jennifer Martinez, let out a loud, "Damn!" from her seat. "Turn the page," Dean Fletcher instructed. I did. The second page was a letter on university letterhead, dated 3 months ago. I recognized the signature at the bottom immediately. Dr. Raymond Wu, chair of my department, cognitive science. Dr. Wu was notoriously difficult to impress, famous for his brutal grading and his tendency to reduce graduate students to tears with his critiques. The letter began, "To whom it may concern, it is my distinct honor to recommend Marcus David Chen for any academic or professional opportunity he may pursue. In my 30 years of teaching at Westfield University, I have rarely encountered a student of Mr. Chen's caliber." My voice cracked as I read it aloud. I had to stop and clear my throat twice. Dr. Wu's letter went on for a full page, detailing my performance in his classes, my research assistant's work in his lab, my exceptional intellectual curiosity and work ethic. He concluded by stating that I was among the top 3 students he had taught in his entire career. When I finished reading, the gymnasium was completely silent. Even Rebecca had lowered her phone. "Continue," Dean Fletcher said gently. The third page was something I'd received only 2 weeks ago, something I hadn't had time to fully process yet because I'd been so focused on final exams and graduation preparations. It was a letter from the journal Cognitive Science Quarterly, one of the most prestigious publications in the field. Dear Mr. Chen, I read aloud, my voice steadier now, we are pleased to inform you that your paper, Computational Models of Implicit Bias, a machine learning approach, has been accepted for publication in our autumn issue. The reviewers were particularly impressed with your methodology and the implications of your findings. As a note, it is exceptionally rare for an undergraduate student to publish in our journal. Congratulations on this significant achievement. The murmuring had turned into gasps. I heard someone in the faculty section actually say, "Holy shit," loud enough to carry. I turned the page again. The fourth document was the most recent. I'd received it just 3 days ago, in an email I'd read approximately 50 times since then, each time convinced I'd somehow misunderstood it. It was a formal offer letter from the Fulbright program. Dear Mr. Chen, I read, and my voice was definitely shaking now. On behalf of the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board, it is my pleasure to inform you that you have been selected to receive a Fulbright research grant for the academic year 2024-2025. You have been awarded a full grant to conduct research at the University of Edinburgh's Centre for Cognitive Science. I couldn't continue. The words were blurring together. My vision was going watery, and my throat had closed up completely. But I didn't need to continue, because Dean Fletcher had stepped away from the podium and was walking toward me again. She took the folder gently from my hands and spoke into the microphone she'd brought with her. For those who couldn't hear or are unfamiliar with what a Fulbright grant represents, allow me to clarify. Mr. Chen has been awarded one of the most prestigious academic scholarships in the world. He will spend the next year in Scotland conducting advanced research, fully funded, at one of the top cognitive science programs globally. Fulbright grants are extraordinarily competitive. Last year, only 16% of applicants received awards. Mr. Chen competed against thousands of applicants from across the United States. She paused, letting that sink in, then continued. I want to be very clear about something. The folder Mr. Chen is holding represents 4 years of exceptional academic achievement, a 3.97 GPA while working multiple part-time jobs, research that is being published in a peer-reviewed journal, a recommendation from a professor who is notoriously sparing with his praise, and now a Fulbright grant. Dean Fletcher turned slightly to look up at the bleachers, at section K, row 7, where my family sat. Her expression had gone cold. I happened to be sitting close enough to overhear a comment made during Mr. Chen's walk across the stage, a comment suggesting that he only passed because people felt sorry for him. Her voice dropped, became sharp as a blade. I want to assure everyone in this auditorium that we do not award degrees out of pity. We certainly do not name students to the dean's list out of pity. Academic journals do not publish papers out of pity, and the Fulbright program most definitely does not award grants out of pity. The silence in the gymnasium had taken on a different quality now. It was no longer the silence of people watching a disruption with curiosity. It was the silence of people witnessing something significant, something they would talk about for years afterward. Mr. Chen earned every single thing in this folder, Dean Fletcher continued. He earned it through intelligence, dedication, and extraordinary perseverance in the face of circumstances that would have broken many students. The person who made that comment should be deeply ashamed. She handed the folder back to me, then did something I didn't expect. She started clapping. It started as just her applause echoing through the gymnasium. Then Dr. Wu stood up in the faculty section and joined her. Then the president of the university. Then the students in my row, Jennifer and David and all the others. Then the entire graduating class was standing, applauding, some of them cheering, and then families in the bleachers were standing too, joining in, until it felt like the entire gymnasium was on its feet except for 4 people in section K, row 7. I stood there on the stage, clutching my folder with its devastating evidence of my worth, and cried in front of 3,000 people while they gave me a standing ovation that lasted for 2 full minutes. When it finally died down and I could see clearly again, I looked up at my family. Rebecca's phone had slipped from her hands and fallen onto the gymnasium floor. She wasn't smirking anymore. She looked shocked, maybe even impressed, though she'd never admit it. Marcus had stopped laughing. His mouth was hanging open slightly, his expression caught between disbelief and something that might have been respect. My father was staring at me with an intensity I'd never seen before, like he was seeing me for the first time as an actual person rather than just his disappointing son. And my mother's face had gone completely white. Her arms hung limp at her sides. She was trying to speak, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. The smug satisfaction had collapsed into something else entirely. Shock, shame. the sudden, crushing realization that she had just publicly humiliated herself far more than she had humiliated me. Dean Fletcher's voice came one more time, gentle now. "Mr. Chen, you may exit the stage. Congratulations on your extraordinary achievements." I walked off the stage on legs that barely held me, the folder clutched to my chest like armor. As I descended the stairs and returned to my seat, my fellow graduates reached out to touch my shoulder, to whisper congratulations, to offer quiet words of support. David Mackenzie, who I'd barely ever spoken to, leaned over and said, "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen at a graduation." The ceremony continued. More names were called. More students walked across the stage, but the energy in the room had fundamentally changed. Everyone knew they'd witnessed something unusual, something that would become a story told and retold for years in Westfield University's unofficial history. I didn't hear any of the remaining names. I sat in my seat, holding my folder, and tried to process what had just happened. Dean Fletcher had humiliated my mother in front of 3,000 people. She'd done it deliberately, methodically, with surgical precision. She'd taken my mother's cruelty and reflected it back amplified, using the tools of academic achievement as her weapons. Part of me felt vindicated, justified. The satisfaction of public validation after years of private doubt was intoxicating, but another part of me felt something more complicated. Because as much as my mother had hurt me, as much as her words had cut, she was still my mother. And watching her face collapse in public shame wasn't quite the victory I'd imagined it would be. The ceremony ended with the traditional moving of the tassels and the tossing of caps into the air. Mine stayed firmly on my head. I didn't feel much like celebrating. The gymnasium emptied slowly, families crowding the aisles to take photos, graduates hugging each other and signing yearbooks, the organized chaos of 3,000 people trying to leave through 6 doors at once. I stayed in my seat long after my row had cleared, holding my folder, watching people stream past. Jennifer stopped on her way out. "Hey, that was really something. Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Well, for what it's worth, you were amazing. And your mom is a piece of work." She paused. "Are you going to talk to them? Your family?" "I don't know," I said again. She squeezed my shoulder once and left. I finally stood up when one of the event coordinators started stacking chairs, giving me pointed looks that said the gymnasium needed to be cleared. I joined the flow of people heading toward the exits, my diploma in one hand, my folder in the other. Outside, the June sun was brutal after the air-conditioned interior. Families clustered on the lawn in front of the gymnasium, taking commemorative photos, graduates posing with their diplomas, proud parents adjusting mortarboards and straightening gowns. The smell of sunscreen and cut grass and someone's perfume hung heavy in the humid air. I scanned the crowd, looking for my family. Part of me hoped they'd already left, that I wouldn't have to face them, that I could just get in my car and drive back to my apartment and deal with this later, or never. But they were there, standing off to the side near the parking lot, clearly waiting for me. Rebecca saw me first and said something to my mother, who turned to look. I could have walked away. Should have, probably. But my feet carried me toward them anyway, drawn by 4 years of hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment when they finally understood, when they finally saw me, when they finally felt proud. I stopped a few feet away from them, close enough to talk, far enough to run if I needed to. "Hey," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Marcus spoke first. "Dude, a Fulbright? That's actually insane." "Thanks." Rebecca was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Why didn't you tell us? About any of it? The grades, the publication, the grant?" "I did tell you. Every time I came home, every phone call, I told you about my classes, my research, my applications. You just never listened." That landed like a slap. Rebecca's face flushed and she looked away. My father stepped forward. "Son, I had no idea. I didn't realize you were doing so well. That's really something. I'm proud of you." The words should have meant something. I'd spent 22 years wanting to hear my father say he was proud of me. But hearing it now, in this moment, after what had happened, they felt hollow, empty, like he was saying them because he was supposed to, not because he meant them. "Thanks," I said again, flatly. My mother hadn't said anything yet. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes red like she'd been crying, her face still that awful shade of white. Finally, she spoke. "Marcus, Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I didn't mean for that to come out like it did. What I said in there, I was joking. You know how I am. I didn't think—" "You didn't think anyone would hear you?" I interrupted. "Or you didn't think it would matter?" "I didn't think it would be such a big deal." How was I supposed to know the dean was sitting right there? How was I supposed to know she'd... My mother gestured helplessly back toward the gymnasium. She humiliated me, Marcus, in front of everyone. She had no right... Something inside me snapped. She had no right. My voice came out louder than I intended, sharp enough that several nearby families turned to look. She had no right. You publicly announced to 3,000 people that I only passed because of pity, and you're upset that someone called you out on it? I said I was joking. It wasn't a joke. You've been saying things like that for 4 years. Every time I called home, every time I visited, every single accomplishment, you found a way to diminish it. When I made the dean's list, you said it was probably easier than I thought. When I got my research position, you said they probably needed to fill a spot. When I told you I was applying for the Fulbright, you said I shouldn't get my hopes up because I wasn't the kind of student who won things like that. My mother's face was crumpling. I was trying to protect you? From what? From believing I could succeed? From having confidence? From thinking I deserved good things? From being disappointed, she shouted back. From getting your hopes up and having them crushed. That's what happens to people like us, Marcus. We don't get the fancy grants and the publications and the perfect grades. We work hard and we get by and we don't aim for things that are out of our reach because when we fail, we fall that much harder. The silence that followed was suffocating. Around us, people were definitely staring now, but I didn't care anymore. People like us, I repeated quietly. That's what this is about. You decided I was going to fail before I even started because you failed. And every time I succeeded, it was evidence that you were wrong about me, about yourself, about everything. That's not fair. You were wrong, Mom. I'm not you. My life doesn't have to look like yours. I can aim for things that are out of reach and actually reach them. I can succeed. I did succeed. And instead of being happy for me, instead of celebrating with me, you tried to tear me down in front of everyone because you couldn't stand watching me prove you wrong. Tears were running down my mother's face now. I'm your mother. I know what's best for you. No, I said. You don't. You've never known, because you've never actually tried to know me. You just projected all your fears and insecurities onto me and called it protection. Rebecca had started crying too now. Marcus was staring at his shoes. My father looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what. I took a step back. I'm leaving. I'm getting in my car, and I'm going back to my apartment, and I'm going to celebrate my graduation with people who actually support me. Marcus, wait. My mother reached for me, but I stepped back again. Don't. Just don't. I need space. I need time. I need you to think about what you said in there and why it was so unforgivably cruel. And when you're ready to have a real conversation about it, when you're ready to actually apologize instead of making excuses, you know how to reach me. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard my mother sob once, loudly, and heard Rebecca say, Mom, let him go. I made it halfway across the parking lot before the adrenaline crash hit and my legs turned to jelly. I leaned against someone's car and tried to catch my breath, or tried to stop the shaking that had taken over my entire body. Mr. Chen? I looked up. Dean Fletcher was standing a few feet away, still in her academic regalia, her expression concerned. I saw you talking to your family, she said carefully. Are you all right? I don't know, I said for the third time that day. She moved closer. What I did in there, exposing your achievements like that, I want you to know I didn't do it lightly. I don't normally insert myself into students' family dynamics. But what your mother said was so profoundly inappropriate, so publicly cruel, that I felt I had to respond. I hope you understand. I do, I said. And I'm grateful, I think. It's just complicated? Yeah. Dean Fletcher smiled slightly. Family always is. For what it's worth, I meant every word I said in there. Your achievements are extraordinary. You should be incredibly proud of yourself. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm proud. But I also feel, I don't know, empty? Like I worked so hard to prove something to people who were never going to be impressed no matter what I did. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to prove things to them, she said gently, and start accomplishing things for yourself. The Fulbright grant? That's not about your mother or your family. That's about you and your brilliant mind and the research you're going to do. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even them. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Go celebrate, Dean Fletcher said. You've earned it. And Mr. Chen? When you come back from Edinburgh next year, I want to hear all about your research. I have a feeling you're going to do remarkable things. She walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my folder full of proof that I was worth something. I didn't hear from my family for 3 weeks after graduation. 3 weeks of silence while I packed up my apartment, said goodbye to friends, prepared for my move to Edinburgh. 3 weeks of checking my phone obsessively, wondering if they'd call, hoping they wouldn't, dreading that they might. My apartment was a studio on the 3rd floor of a building that had probably been condemned at some point but somehow remained standing. 500 square feet of peeling paint, creaky floors, and a bathroom with plumbing that made concerning noises at 3 a.m. But it had been mine. The first place that was truly mine. Away from my family, away from everything I'd grown up with. I'd moved in 4 years ago with nothing but a backpack of clothes and a laptop I'd saved for 3 years to buy. Now, packing it up, I was amazed by how much I'd accumulated. Books, mostly. Textbooks I'd bought used and covered and other students highlighting. Research papers printed out and annotated in my messy handwriting. Novels I'd read late at night when the stress got too overwhelming and I needed to escape into someone else's story. I packed everything into boxes from the liquor store down the street, labeled them carefully, arranged for most of it to go into storage since I'd only be able to bring 2 suitcases to Scotland. The physical act of packing was meditative, gave me something to do with my hands while my mind spun in circles. I replayed the graduation scene over and over. My mother's voice, the folder, Dean Fletcher's speech, the look on my family's face, my confrontation with them afterward. Every detail felt simultaneously crystal clear and completely surreal, like it had happened to someone else and I'd just watched it on television. My friends tried to get me to go out, to celebrate, to properly mark the end of our undergraduate careers. I went to a few things, a bar crawl that ended with half our class throwing up in an alley, a formal dinner that someone's parents paid for, a bonfire at the beach where we burned our worst essays and drunkenly sang our school song. But my heart wasn't in it. I felt disconnected from the joy everyone else was experiencing, like I was watching their celebration through thick glass. They'd graduated and felt accomplished. I'd graduated and felt complicated. On day 17 of the silence, Rebecca called. I stared at her name on my phone screen for a long time before answering. Hello? Hey. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. Don't hang up, okay? Okay. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing, see if you're still mad. I'm not mad, I said, and realized it was true. I wasn't mad, I was just tired. I'm just disappointed. That's worse, isn't it? Being disappointed instead of mad? Yeah. Silence for a moment. Then, Mom's a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying since graduation. She keeps saying she ruined everything, that you hate her now, that she's the worst mother in the world. I didn't say anything. Dad's barely speaking to her. He's still trying to process the whole thing. I think it's the first time he's really thought about what your life has been like the past 4 years, about how hard you've been working while we just dismissed it. And Marcus? Marcus thinks you're the coolest person alive now. He keeps Googling what Fulbright grants are and showing people your acceptance letter that he found on Mom's kitchen counter. I think he's actually proud of you. He has a weird way of showing it. Rebecca laughed, but it sounded sad. Yeah, we all do, I guess. Listen, I know you said you needed space, and I'm not trying to push you, but I wanted you to know that we're all thinking about you, and that I'm sorry for laughing, for recording it, for never taking you seriously when you tried to tell us about your accomplishments. You were right. We never listened. And that's on us, not you. It was the first real apology I'd gotten. Thank you. That means something. Are you still leaving for Scotland in August? Yeah, August 15th. Will you let us see you before you go? Maybe come to dinner? I know Mom really wants to talk to you. Properly, I mean. Not just making excuses. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to leave with things unresolved, to teach them what it felt like to be shut out. But another part of me knew I'd regret it if I left for a year without at least trying to fix what was broken. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. That's fair. And Marcus? For what it's worth, I read your paper, the one that got published. I had to Google like half the words, but I read it, and it was really smart. I'm proud of you, too. I should have said that earlier. After we hung up, I sat in my half-packed apartment and cried for the first time since graduation. Not sad tears, exactly. More like release. The kind of crying that happens when something that's been wound too tight finally loosens. On day 21, my mother called. I answered on the 4th ring. Hi, Mom. Marcus. Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying recently. Thank you for answering. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I wouldn't blame you if you hadn't. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to talk to me again. She took a shaky breath. I've been trying to figure out what to say to you, how to apologize. I've written probably 50 different texts and deleted all of them because nothing felt like enough. Okay, I'm not going to make excuses. What I said at your graduation was inexcusable. It was cruel and small, and I knew it was wrong even as I was saying it. I think part of me wanted to hurt you, to cut you down, and I hate myself for that. I waited. You were right about everything you said, about me projecting my failures onto you, about being afraid of your success because it meant I was wrong about so many things. I convinced myself I was protecting you when really I was just protecting myself, from feeling like a failure, from having to confront my own choices and regrets. Why? I asked. Why did you need to tear me down to feel okay about yourself? Because watching you succeed made me realize how much I'd given up on, how much I'd settled. I dropped out of college when I got pregnant with Rebecca. I married your father even though I knew we weren't right for each other. I've worked at the same grocery store for 20 years because it was safe and easy, and I didn't believe I deserved anything better. And then you came along and you just refused to settle. You refused to accept limitations. You worked so hard for things I'd convinced myself were impossible. And it was like looking in a mirror and seeing everything I could have been if I'd been braver. Her voice broke. But that's not your fault. That's not your burden to carry. You shouldn't have had to fight against your own mother just to pursue your dreams. You shouldn't have had to prove yourself over and over because I couldn't handle my own insecurities. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. I was crying again. I needed you to believe in me. I know. I needed you to be proud, to support me, to celebrate with me instead of tearing me down. I know, and I failed you, completely. But I want you to know that I am proud. So incredibly proud. When Dean Fletcher read all those achievements, when I saw that folder and realized what you'd accomplished, I felt proud and devastated at the same time. Proud of who you've become, devastated that I almost missed it, that I was so busy trying to protect myself from disappointment that I nearly destroyed our relationship. We were both crying now. Through the phone, I could hear her trying to catch her breath between sobs. I don't know how to fix this, she said finally. I don't know if I can fix this, but I want to try, if you'll let me. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, I admitted. I'm still processing everything, still trying to figure out how to move forward. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll wait, however long it takes. I'm leaving for Scotland in 3 weeks. I know, Rebecca told me. A pause. Would you consider having dinner with us before you go? Just once? You don't have to decide anything or forgive anything. I just want to see you, to properly say goodbye before you leave for a year. I thought about it, about spending an evening with my family, with all this weight between us, trying to make small talk and pretend things were normal when they weren't. But I also thought about leaving for Scotland with this unresolved, about spending a year overseas with this heaviness following me, wondering what might have been different if I'd given them one more chance. Okay, I said, one dinner, but I'm not making any promises about what comes after. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. We set a date, 3 days before my flight. Then we sat in awkward silence for a moment, neither of us sure how to end the call. Marcus, my mother said finally, I really am proud of you. I know I've never said it enough, or shown it properly, but I am. You're extraordinary. And I'm sorry it took public humiliation for me to say that out loud. Thanks, Mom. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes and thought about forgiveness, about family, about the complicated mathematics of love and resentment and hope. I didn't know if I could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever completely, but I was willing to try. The restaurant my mother chose was the nicest one in our small town, a steakhouse on Main Street that usually only saw business during prom season and anniversaries. She'd made a reservation for 5 people at 7 p.m., sent me 3 confirmatory texts to make sure I was still coming, and according to Rebecca's warning message, had changed her outfit 4 times before leaving the house. I arrived exactly at 7, parking my car in the lot and sitting for a moment to gather myself. Through the restaurant's large front windows, I could see my family already seated at a booth in the corner. My mother kept checking her phone. My father was studying the menu with intense concentration. Rebecca and Marcus were talking, though Marcus kept looking toward the door. I could leave, just start the car and drive away. Send a text apologizing, saying I couldn't do this. Spend the next 3 days avoiding them, and then fly to Scotland with everything still broken between us. But I didn't. I got out of the car and walked inside. The hostess greeted me, checked her list, and led me to the booth. My family looked up as I approached, and the relief on my mother's face was so palpable it was almost painful to witness. Marcus, she said, starting to stand. Thank you for coming. Hi, I said, sliding into the booth next to Rebecca. Marcus was on my other side, and across from us sat my parents, side by side, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen them. There was an awkward moment where no one knew what to say. We all studied our menus, though I doubted anyone was actually reading them. Finally, my father cleared his throat. The steaks here are supposed to be good, real good. Jerry from work comes here for his anniversary every year. That's nice, I said. More silence. The waitress came and took our drink orders. Water for everyone except my father, who ordered a beer, then changed his mind to water after a look from my mother. After she left, the silence returned. Heavier now. This is ridiculous, Marcus said suddenly. We're all just sitting here like strangers. Marcus, he looked at me. I'm sorry for laughing. At graduation, it was a dick move. You're actually really cool, and I've been telling everyone I know about your Fulbright thing. Some of my friends want your autograph when you're famous. Despite everything, I smiled. I'm not going to be famous. You don't know that. You're doing brain stuff, right? Cognitive science? That's like understanding how people think. That's superhero stuff. It's really not. It kind of is, Rebecca said. I've been doing some reading about your field since graduation. It's actually fascinating. I didn't realize how much math was involved. There's a lot of computational modeling, statistics, programming. You know how to program? My father looked genuinely surprised. Yeah, Python, R, some MATLAB. You kind of have to in cognitive science. He sat back. I didn't know that. That's impressive. The waitress returned with our drinks and took our food orders. After she left, my mother finally spoke. I wanted this dinner to be a proper send-off, before you leave for Scotland, before everything changes. She was gripping her water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I wanted to tell you, in front of everyone, that I'm proud of you, that what you've accomplished is extraordinary, and that I'm sorry for not saying that sooner, for not showing it, for actively working against it. Mom? Rebecca started. No, let me finish. I need to say this. My mother looked directly at me, her eyes already red. Marcus, I was wrong. About everything. I spent 4 years telling you that college was a waste, that you'd fail, that you were aiming too high. I told myself I was being realistic, being protective, but really I was just scared. Scared that you'd prove you were better than me, smarter than me, braver than me, and I couldn't handle that, so I tried to tear you down instead of building you up. She was crying now, but she kept going. What I said at your graduation, that you only passed because people felt sorry for you, that was the worst thing I've ever said. Not just because it was public, but because it was designed to hurt you in the most fundamental way, to make you doubt yourself right when you should have been celebrating, and I'm ashamed of that. Deeply, completely ashamed. Linda, my father said quietly, putting his hand over hers. I don't expect you to forgive me, my mother continued. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better, trying to be the mother you deserved all along, even if it's too late, even if you decide you don't want me in your life anymore. The booth had gone completely silent. Marcus was staring at his plate. Rebecca was wiping her eyes. My father was gripping my mother's hand like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. I took a breath. I needed to hear that, all of it. But I need you to understand that I can't just forget 4 years of being undermined, of having my accomplishments dismissed, of feeling like I had to fight my own family just to pursue my dreams. I know, my mother whispered. And I need you to understand that moving forward, if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be different. You don't get to diminish my achievements. You don't get to project your regrets onto me. You don't get to make me responsible for your emotional well-being. I understand. I'm not saying I can't forgive you. I'm saying it's going to take time and work, honey, and you proving through actions, not just words, that things have actually changed. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes. Our food arrived then, and the conversation shifted to safer topics as we ate. Marcus talked about his plans to start community college in the fall. Rebecca mentioned she was thinking about going back to school herself, maybe finishing the degree she'd started and abandoned 5 years ago. My father asked questions about Edinburgh, about my research, about what a typical day would look like for a Fulbright scholar. It wasn't comfortable exactly. There was still too much weight, too much history, too much unresolved pain. But it was a start, a tentative step towards something that might eventually look like healing. Toward the end of the meal, my father excused himself to use the restroom. When he came back, he was carrying a small wrapped box. We wanted to give you something, he said, setting it in front of me. For Scotland, for your research, for everything. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a watch. Nothing expensive or fancy, but nice. Simple. The back was engraved, "To Marcus. You were always extraordinary. We were just too blind to see it. Love, your family." I stared at the engraving for a long time, my vision blurring. "It's not enough," my mother said quickly. "I know it's not enough, but we wanted you to have something to remember that we're proud of you, that we're supporting you, that even though we messed up so badly, we love you." "Thank you," I managed. "I love it." We finished dinner and split the check, despite my parents' insistence on paying for everything. Outside the restaurant, we stood in the parking lot, none of us quite ready to say goodbye. "You'll call when you get there?" Rebecca asked. "To Edinburgh?" "Yeah, I'll call." "And you'll send pictures?" "I will." Marcus hugged me suddenly, fiercely. "You're going to do amazing things. I know it." "Thanks, kid." Rebecca hugged me next, whispering, "I really am proud of you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." My father hugged me last, awkward and brief, but genuine. "Take care of yourself over there. And Marcus, you're a hell of a lot smarter than I ever was. Don't let anyone tell you different." Finally, my mother. She held me for a long time, and I could feel her shaking. "Come back," she whispered. "Please come back. And when you do, let's try again. Let's do this right." "Okay," I said. "We'll try."